Well, good afternoon and welcome to this latest in a series of webinars that we have been hosting for the admitted students of the Boston College class of 2024. My name is John Mahoney and I'm the Vice Provost for Enrollment Management at Boston College. And what that means is that I oversee the areas of admission, financial aid, and student services. As we begin the session this afternoon, the first thing that I want to do, of course, is to extend my sincere hopes that everybody viewing this afternoon, students, parents, and your extended family and friends, that everybody is safe and healthy during this very challenging time for our country. We are obviously concerned for the welfare of everybody out there. We are watching the news carefully each day. Clearly, the practicing of social distancing is working, and we're starting to, we hope, see that bend in the curve that will have us restored to normalcy soon enough. But you have our hopes and prayers that everybody is safe and healthy as we begin here this afternoon. The second thing that I want to do is to extend my personal congratulations to each and every one of you for earning admission to the Boston College class of 2024. Clearly, whether it was your performance in the classroom or the things that you did outside of the classroom, or the personal qualities that we learned about from your essays or from your teachers or from your guidance counselors, you are students who really stood out for us. You've achieved the kinds of things that have made us very excited by the prospect that you might be joining the Boston College community. So congratulations for work well done over these last 4 years. You've earned this opportunity. We know you have many great choices at this point. We're glad that you're considering Boston College, and we wish you the best as you head into these final 2 weeks before you make your decision on where you're going to enroll. This afternoon's session is entitled Financing Your Education, and it's really about costs and financial aid. And of course, we all know that private higher education is an extremely expensive proposition for families. It's challenging for families to think about financing an education, and yet on the other hand, it's also an extraordinary investment for families, which has dividends that are accrued throughout the course of a lifetime. So we're glad that you're able to join us for this session on costs and financial aid. I'm really pleased to be joined by my colleague from the Financial Aid Office. Melissa Metcalf is the Associate Director of Financial Aid at Boston College. She's a very seasoned professional, somebody that I've really enjoyed working with for many years, and she has expertise and knowledge that I'm sure will be valuable to all of you this afternoon. Melissa has spent really the last couple of weeks building this presentation based on the questions that you've submitted in advance to us. So trust that a lot of the things that you might have submitted will be addressed during the course of the presentation. When she is finished, we will have an opportunity to field any additional questions that might come in. We're going to ask you at this point to hold off and sort of watch the beginning of the presentation and watch as Melissa works through it. But by all means, if there are things that she doesn't address, we'll try to save some time before the end of the hour in which we will be able to address them. So once again, thank you for joining us. And at this point, I'm going to turn it to my colleague, Melissa Metcalf, Associate Director in the Office of Financial Aid at Boston College.
Thank you, John. Welcome, everybody. I am not able to share my screen or my PowerPoint with you at the moment, but I am going to go through it, and hopefully we'll figure it out as we go along. So welcome to this webinar. We're going to talk a little bit about who we are, the Office of Student Services, as well as the application process, the financial aid award, and then how to finance or pay for school. Here at Boston College, we have what's called a one-stop shop. We're the Office of Student Services. Unlike some other schools where there's an actual financial aid office, we are a group of offices that have come together and now in one single spot. We are student accounts, credit and collection, the registrar, financial aid, and then some auxiliary services. We are located in Lyons Hall, which is in the quad right across from Devlin Hall, where admissions is. And I will be happy to share our contact information as soon as I'm able to share my screen. We have just through this working remotely for everyone, we've developed an upload process for all documents that should be available as of Monday. So I'll be sure to share that website with you before the completion of this presentation. At this point, hopefully you've all applied for financial aid. Here at BC, we started reading early decisions in December, then again in February, and then the rest of the regular decision students were all read in March. So if you had completed your application, you should have received a financial aid award from us. If you have not received anything, then my recommendation would be to first look at the student's account on the portal using their username, PIN, and their access key that they received in their acceptance letter or email. If there is no award there, then my guess is that there's something missing in your application. You are able to check that application online through bc.edu/finaid-app, FINAID-APP, or you're welcome to call our office. We do have people answering the phones despite the fact that no one's in the office at the moment. So if you haven't applied for financial aid yet, there are several different application pieces that are required before anyone will review the file. The first is the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. This can be found online through the Department of Ed. It is free, like the name says. It should not cost anyone anything to do this, nor should you be paying anyone to help you do this. There are plenty of resources out there. This year, the Department of Ed is requiring 2018 taxes to be used in filling this form out. Boston College also uses the CSS profile. This is found on the College Board website, and as I'm sure you're all familiar with College Board through the SATs, the ACTs, it is also the organization that we use to for our institutional need analysis. So we do ask that that students do fill out the profile. And then finally, we require 2018 federal taxes from both parent and student, and that's complete with all schedules and W-2s. So if you have not submitted one of these three items that I've mentioned, you probably have not received a financial aid award yet. So one of those is missing, and I would encourage you to either look online through the portal or to contact Student Services to find out which one might be missing. Quickly, just to go through the timeline, February we started.
Melissa?
Yes.
If I could interrupt you, just so you know, the participants are now able to view the presentation. It may not be showing on your screen, but the participants are able to view it, so you can work from your PowerPoint.
Great. Okay. Thank you. So the timeline. We started reviewing awards this year. Was our first year as early decision, so it was in December. But February is usually when most schools are sending out early decision or early action awards. This is when you want to start reviewing them and comparing one to the other. May 1st is a deposit deadline. This is a national deposit deadline. I know some schools have discussed moving this, but at Boston College, we still are May 1st. This is also when we would send our federal verification form, and it might be, if you're interested, when you would sign up for a payment plan. June is when our first bill is sent to students, and August is when the first fall bill is due. I will mention that with the Office of Student Services coming together almost 2 decades ago now, we also went paperless. So any kind of communication that we're sending to you is either through the portal or coming to the student via email. So when you're looking for a financial aid award, this will be on the portal. It will not be sent to you in paper. And that is the same case for the bill that would be sent in June. It would be through the portal, and you would receive a notification via email. November is when the spring bill is sent to families, and that bill is due in December, right before the holidays. This is also when the financial aid process would start for the returning student. So here at Boston College, we participate in need-based financial aid. We only have one merit program, and that is the Gabelli Presidential Scholarship. These have already been selected, and they are selected through the Office of Admissions. So financial aid and student services do not select these students. So any aid through the Office of Student Services is need-based, and that assumes that the parent and the student are primarily responsible for paying for or financing these college costs, and the university would supplement that process. In order to determine a student's need for assistance, we use formulas, both a federal and an institutional formula, and this is a measure of what a family is expected to contribute toward the student's education for that 1 year. And these methodologies are standard. We use the federal methodology through the means of the FAFSA to determine all eligibility for federal aid, and then we use the institutional methodology to determine eligibility for Boston College grant. BC remains committed to meeting a student's 100% of their demonstrated institutional need. We have been doing this for a decade and a half, almost 2 decades, and so it's a very large commitment. We are meeting the student's need through a combination of grants, loans, and work opportunities. And this current year, we've spent over $140 million in institutional, federal, and state scholarships and grants alone, and that does not include loans and work. That is just straight grant money. So you can see that it's a pretty impressive commitment on Boston College's part, and we are hoping to maintain that commitment through this anxious time with what's happening globally. Just a little vocabulary to help you understand how or what we're all talking about when you call us in here in Student Services. The financial aid community speaks in acronyms often, and so no one understands anything that we're talking about, and we have to remind ourselves to speak English. So you're going to hear a lot about, well, first of all, the COA, or the cost of attendance. This is just a budget that we use. It includes tuition fees, room, board, book supplies, transportation, and personal expenses. So you can see from that list, it's both direct and indirect costs. So things that we will be charging you, as well as things that you will pay out of pocket that we will not be charging you for. It's just an estimate, and it's what we award the student within. You'll also hear the term EFC quite a bit, if you haven't already, and this stands for Expected Family Contribution, and this is the result or the measure of what a family is expected to contribute over 1 year. So because we're using 2 different formulas, we're also using 2 different EFCs. Finally, you're going to hear the word need quite a bit, and this is kind of a loaded emotional word, but it truly is just another way of saying eligibility. A student's need is simply the difference between the cost of attendance and the EFC. And this is what it would look like. It's literally the budget or the cost of attendance that the university has determined for that particular student, subtracting the expected family contribution that we've determined through our methodology, and the result is the financial need or the eligibility for aid. And this is what we would use to build the financial aid package for the student. So here's an example of what a financial aid award would look like. I'm actually using a very close cost of attendance. I just updated it for this presentation, and I agree it's a frightening number. But the cost of attendance is $79,000, and we've determined your expected family contribution to be $35,000 for the year. We subtract one from the other, and the difference is $44,000, and that $44,000 is what we're going to use to build the student's package. And in creating the package, we will consider every student for all aid that they're eligible for from the beginning. So we're not withholding any aid that they may be eligible for. We're going to award them everything that they're eligible for the first time around. And we do so by awarding WorkStudy, if they're eligible, a direct loan, and then we will make up the difference with Boston College grant scholarship. So we have quite a few questions about loans and work. So I've added a few slides in order to cover some of those questions. So if I don't hit everything, then feel free to either ask at the end of the presentation, or you're more than welcome to contact the Office of Student Services and speak to your financial aid counselor. So one of the components of the award is WorkStudy. This is actually somewhat of a placeholder within the award. It is not money that the student is given toward their balance on their student account. The student will get a job through either an application or interview starting opening weekend, which is, last year it was August 22nd. I'm not quite sure of the date, but it's the last week in August before the weekend that the students all move in. That's when all the student employment jobs become available. The student will contact the department, set up an interview, hopefully be hired. They'll be paid at least minimum wage, and they will be paid weekly through direct deposit for the hours they work. So it's just like any other job, and they could use this money to either pay a balance or for personal and miscellaneous expenses that they may incur throughout the year. They do have to sign original documentation. They have to sign an I-9, an M4, and a W-4, just like we do when we get a new job. So they do need original documents like a social security card, a birth certificate, a license. And hopefully you can see my slide. I do have the website where we host all of these available positions. Again, for the 2021 year, the new jobs will be posted at the end of August, but the website is up and running for this current year, so you're welcome to take a look at it, and that's bc.edu/student employment. There's also an opportunity to work off campus, whether you have WorkStudy or not, and you can find available jobs through collegehelpers.com, and you'll often see families in the area or local establishments want open positions through this website. The other piece or component of the financial aid award that most students will see are the direct loans. This it used to be called the Stafford loan for those of us that borrowed one when we were in college. It's now called the direct loan, and it's basically the Department of Ed is the lender. There are two different kinds, a subsidized and an unsubsidized loan, and the one that your student gets depends on your need, your federal need that you've demonstrated. Subsidized means that the interest rate is being subsidized or paid by the federal government while the student is enrolled at least half-time in a degree program. Unsubsidized means that the interest is accruing. The student is not required to pay the interest. It will defer and capitalize with the principal. Both loans have the same interest rate and origination fee. So right now the interest rate is 4.53%, and this is a fixed rate, and it's reset annually on July 1st. So that's just some quick information about those components. If you choose to deposit, you will receive much more information about those two processes from the Office of Student Services. Another piece of the financial aid award that people have lots of questions about is outside scholarships. Where do they come from? How do I get them? How does your office treat them? Are they worth the work? So outside scholarships are anything that is coming from anywhere else but the federal government or the school you're applying to. So oftentimes it's from your parents or your employer, from the Knights of Columbus, the boosters, the local grocery store down the street. We are federally required to count these as a resource within the financial aid award. Every school does this differently. BC tries to do this in the least penalizing way as possible, so we will replace loan and work before we would replace any student's Boston College grant. So it really comes down to how much is the student getting. And this is a generalization, but most students will not have any negative impact to their award if they get less than $6,000 in outside scholarship. But again, that every student's award is different. That's a case by case, but that's a general occurrence. If you're receiving over than the $6,000, then we have to replace something. If you think of the financial aid award as a barrel, and the barrel is filled with the different components. First, your expected family contribution, then the work study, then the direct loan, and then Boston College grant. And because we meet full need, the barrel's filled up to the top. And as you pour in outside aid, something else has to come out. So that's, if you can keep that barrel scenario in mind as you're thinking about how outside aid is impacts the financial aid award. The best place to find these is your high school. The guidance office at your high schools usually have a list that is updated annually, and this is really the best source for an incoming freshman. You also want to go to any of the libraries, employers, or civic organizations in your area. There is a national scholarship search called fastweb.com, but it is pretty extensive and obscure. So I'm not sure, it's a productive search. Okay, so you've gotten your financial aid award and you have a balance due. So now we're going to talk about options for paying the balance. This slide, hopefully you can see it, talks about past income, present income, and future income. And the reason why I use this is not only is this how the actual formula works, It's not a cash flow analysis. It's actually looking at your past, present, and future income. But that's exactly how you can pay the bill. You can use past income like savings or any other assets you might have saved. This would be, an example would be your 529 plans that you might have saved for your child since they were born. You can use present income. So this is anything out of your current salary. Most of the time people do this through a payment plan. We do have a 10-month payment plan available to you that starts in May and ends in February, if I do the math correctly. And you can contract as much or as little as possible to that plan. There's no finance charge, and it's a good way to pay out of pocket over a period of time, just like you would every other large purchase. And then finally, future income, and this would be borrowing or financing. And the analysis, like I said, is not determining cash flow. It actually, there is an assumption in the formula that if there are assets or ability to borrow, that the family would do that in order to meet the contribution. So I've given an example of some combinations here. I personally don't know anybody that can write a check for $79,000 all at once. Most families are using the payment plan or financing this, just like they would a car or a home. Or they're doing some combination of all of the above. So as an example, say you have $10,000 in a balance due. If you decided to do a payment plan over the 10 months, that would be $1,000 a month for 10 months. And like I said, there's no finance charge. There is a one-time fee up front, which includes an insurance policy, but it's minimal. I think it's like $25, $30 at the beginning. And then you just be paying the $1,000 a month for 10 months. Say that doesn't work for you and that's too much for a monthly payment. You can borrow a parent loan. And in this case, I've used the PLUS loan, which is the parent's loan for undergraduate students. It's the federal parent loan. I used it as an example because it's a fixed rate and I know what the rate is, but it's not it's not necessarily the best loan out there. I'm just using it as an example. But the rate right now is 7.08%. There is an origination fee, which is why it's not a great loan. So with those in mind, if you were to borrow $10,000, that would be $121.46 a month payment over 10 years. That's the standard payment period for an educational loan. So maybe you don't want to borrow a loan for 10 years, or maybe you can actually pay a little more per month than the $121. First of all, there's no prepayment penalty on most educational loans, but maybe you want to pay some out of pocket and then finance the rest. So an example of that would be $5,000 on the payment plan would be $500 a month for 10 months. And then if you borrowed the other $5,000 through the PLUS loan, that would be $60.84 a month for 10 years. So you can see that brings down your monthly payment quite a bit from the $1,000 a month. So this is what your family would need to sit down and decide what works best for you. You want to look at your cash flow each month and determine what you're able to pay out of pocket. As we'll talk about in a few minutes, the more you pay out of pocket, the less you're going to pay over time. So there's many options out there for choosing a loan. The financial aid office here in Student Services will award the student their loans, their federal loans that they're eligible for through the financial aid process up front. But most families, or many families, I should say, have to borrow a private loan or from a lender or bank or a credit union in order to make up their family contribution. And in doing so, there are many things to consider. First of all, we have done some of the work for you. We do have on our website a resource. There's two different resources now. We've just added one. One is called Elm Select, where we list many lenders that we work with and have relationships with, and you're able to compare and contrast based on interest rate, APR, or other qualities of the requirements of the loan that you're looking for. There's also another product out there called, it escapes me for the second. I'll get back to it. But it's like an aggregator where you can plug in your information. It does a soft credit check, and it will bring up loans that you're actually eligible for. So some things to think about when you're choosing which loan to go for is, first of all, you need to know whether the loan is federal or private. I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but they are very different. Federal loans tend to have higher interest rates, but they tend to have better repayment terms. There's forbearance opportunities or deferment if someone were to lose a job or become ill, and some of them have forgiveness programs tied to them. Private loans through a private bank, a lender, a credit union do not tend to have these repayment benefits to them. And if they do, you're paying extra for them through the interest rate. Say you were to lose a job and you had a federal loan, the servicer, whoever's servicing the loan, may put it in a forbearance for a while till you get back on your feet, whereas the private lender is not going to let you do that in most cases. So it's just important that you know who you're dealing with and what the expectations are. You also want to consider the interest rate. The example I gave is a fixed interest rate that's reset every year, but most banks are using either prime or LIBOR, and they have a choice of fixed or variable. Again, one is not better than the other. Variable rates tend to be lower, but there's risk to it. And in the last decade, historically, we've had some really low rates, but that particularly in a risky time as now, we don't know what will happen with those rates. Fixed rates tend to be higher, but there's also an emotional piece to that. We're knowing what the monthly payment is every month and being able to rely on that. So again, it's your family decision, but you just need to know which one it is that you're borrowing, because it does impact the monthly payment and it impacts the amount you're paying over time. You also want to consider who the primary borrower is. Is it the student or the parents? Now, once upon a time, students could take out student loans by themselves, but post-2008, I don't know a lender that will give an 18-year-old a loan without a cosigner. They're just too risky because they have no credit, which is worse than having bad credit. So until they've established credit, they need a cosigner in order to borrow these loans. They can, however, be the primary borrower with you as the cosigner. And when that's the case, because they're a riskier borrower, their interest rate is going to be higher. If the parent is the primary borrower and has credit history, their interest rate will be lower. So it's something to consider. Again, it's your choice. It's what's best for your family, but whoever the primary borrower is does impact the interest rate. It's also a good thing to note here that most loans have a cosigner release on them, so the parent can eventually take themselves off the loan after a certain period, a certain many years of on-time payments. And speaking of repayment, that is another factor that needs to be considered. When does the loan repayment begin? So with federal loans that we're awarding the student within their financial aid award, those loans do not go into repayment until the student graduates. But for private loans, if the student is borrowing a private student loan, those loans also will defer until after they graduate, but interest is accruing. Most parent loans go into immediate repayment. So if you were to borrow a loan that is dispersed at the beginning of the fall semester in September, and then the second semester, the second part of the loan is dispersed, that loan is going into repayment anywhere from 45 to 60 days after the second disbursement. So you're talking a year from now, next February, March, that you're going to start repayment on that loan. This is pretty common in the lending industry, but you just need to be prepared for it. Whereas the students don't have to prepare for repayment until 4+ years after they graduate. You want to consider how much your monthly payment will be. I just gave you an example in the last slide about what payment amounts would look like depending on what you borrowed. This is directly related to the interest rate that you're borrowing the money at, and you just need to make sure that it's something that you can afford. You don't want to be short-sighted about the amount you're borrowing and then realize that the payment is something you can't afford. So another thing to consider. And then finally, I think most importantly, is how many years will you be making payments? So most educational loans, the standard repayment is 10 years. However, you can borrow 15 to 20, and then you can even consolidate or refinance up to 25. All of these are good tools in repayment when you're in a situation that you need to either lower the monthly payment or extend it over a period of time due to any kind of life circumstance that you may be experiencing. But just know the longer you're paying, the more you're paying. So you need to make this decision upfront when you're borrowing. So the next slide is just some resources for the direct lending. The Department of Ed has consolidated all of their sites. There used to be a different website for every little thing you were trying to do. It's now all studentaid.gov. So you should be able to access the FAFSA, the direct loan, the plus loans, your FSA ID, all of that information should now be in studentaid.gov. And these are all on our website, so in case you're trying to feverishly write them all down. Here are some more resources, general information. This first link is Undergrad Aid. This links to our website where there's information about how aid is awarded and determined, and timeline for application processes. It also has the direct loan link, and then some long-term financing pages on our website is bc.edu/payment options. This has our tuition and fees, our tuition insurance, links to the alternative loans, the federal loans, as well as our payment plan. So it's a good place to start. And if you want to look at our list of lenders that I spoke to you about, you can reach links to Elm, and the other tool that I was talking about is Credible, and those two can be found at bc.edu/altloans. So some final tips when going through this process, whether you choose to be here at Boston College or somewhere else. I know the financial aid process is pretty daunting, but I think once you go through it once, you'll find that it's easier next time. You first of all want to make sure that you're putting your EAGLE or Social Security numbers on everything you send. I know people are particularly nervous about Social Security numbers, but unfortunately, if we don't have your social, we can't link your information to your FAFSA and the federal aid process. The EAGLE number is sufficient, but make sure that you're putting that on everything, because there's a lot of John Smiths at Boston College. You want to pay attention to deadlines. Here at BC, we have a priority deadline, so kind of a first come, first serve, but at other schools, this may translate into missing aid opportunities. Other schools are not as flexible when it comes to their deadlines. So you want to make sure that you're not missing them. You want to make sure you keep copies of what you send. We have evolved quite a bit in the last few decades where everything is online and scanned and uploaded and web-based, but it's still human beings that are answering those phone calls and sorting that mail sometimes. And just in case something gets lost or damaged, it's easier if you have a copy of it so you can resend it so we can work with you quickly. Most importantly, you want to guesstimate. And what I mean by this is don't wait to fill out a form or an application for actual taxes or maybe you had to file an extension. Don't wait. This will just cause you to miss a deadline and thus an opportunity. You want to make your best guess. You're not going to get in trouble if you make a mistake on the FAFSA. This happens all the time, and it's something that not only can you correct but online, but we can correct it for you as well. So don't be fearful of filing too early and making mistakes. You want to make sure that you get it in on time. And then finally, and I think most importantly, you want to think about how you're going to pay for college for all 4 years. I know, having my own college student and dealing with families that are making this decision all the time, that emotions get in the way, and often it's just getting through that first payment and that first semester. But you need to sit down as a family and discuss what the reality is and how you're actually going to pull this off for 4 years in a row. I think it does need to be a family decision. The students need to know the lengths that you're going to pay for this massive investment, and know that it has to be something that you can afford over the course of their career at a university. The worst thing in the world is to see a student have to drop out their junior year because they can no longer afford it. And nobody wants that. So please have a family conversation about it. Make sure it's a decision that is good for all of you. And I think the best way to figure it out is to ask as many questions as possible. So hopefully I have not gone too quickly. And I think we've left some pretty good time for questions. So I don't know if we have any more that have come in since the presentation started or not.
Thank you, Melissa. Great job. We appreciate the slides that you've gone through and the information that you've conveyed. I'm going to call on my colleague, Grant Gosselin, who's the Director of Undergraduate Admission at Boston College. He's been monitoring the questions and answers coming in during the presentation. We're all in different places, by the way, in case you haven't figured that out. So Grant, if I could call on you at this point, is there anything that was sent in to you during the presentation that Melissa did not cover?
There are quite a few of them, actually, and some of these are relatively quick to answer, and others might take a little bit longer. Wondering if a parent is currently unemployed, are they able to qualify for a parent loan?
So that's a good question, and I don't know if I can actually answer it completely. It will depend on the lender. The bank has their individual criteria for who they approve and who they don't. I think in most cases, lenders want you to be employed, but I know at least for the Federal Plus loan, that's not always a criteria. Sometimes just having a good credit score is enough. So there may be options for you, even though you're unemployed. So I would take a look at our list, and if you have any specific questions, feel free to give us a call.
Thank you. And somebody had asked, what are the options in terms of the type of on-campus jobs a student could hold?
So there are thousands of jobs available at some points. I know that our office hires students. I'm sure our Office of Admissions hires students. There's students working in research areas, dining, the bookstore. If there's a building and people working in it, there's usually a work-study opportunity. There tends to be more jobs available than students working. So if they come home and tell you that they couldn't find a job, that's probably not true. But it might not be something that they love. It might not be in athletics or in the bookstore. It might be, McElroy Dining Hall, which I did in college. So there's no shame in that. They actually also pay very well and feed you after 4 hours. So I think there's plenty of opportunities, and I would recommend you checking out the website.
Another question has come in about if a student has a 2018 W-2 but didn't file taxes, is that required to be submitted?
We do ask for it, but the requirement really depends on whether the student's been selected for verification by the Department of Ed or not. If the student is selected, we are required to have the physical documentation of that W-2. So better safe than sorry, you should send it in.
What is the
if they didn't file?
Child entering college on a family's EFC?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
What is the impact of a second child entering college on a family's?
Good question. So we do take into account when there are multiple students going to college, and there is an allowance made. The allowance is different between the federal formula and the institutional formula. The institutional formula takes into consideration the cost of the university the student is attending. So there is a larger allowance made for the sibling attending a four-year private versus a four-year public, but there are allowances made.
What is the difference between a work-study job and just a regular campus job?
So to the student, there is no difference, except, so this is, nothing is easily answered in financial aid. So the way that the work study impacts a student in a positive way is really in the following year when they apply for financial aid. The income that they earn is not used against them in the financial aid analysis. It's not counted as income. It's like a wash in the formula. Other than that, the student doesn't really see the benefit. They're paid the exact amount they would be if they were a non-work study student. It really is about how it's treated in the formula in the following years. So, and you'd really have to make a significant amount of money for it to have a negative impact to be earning money as not a work study student. I don't know if that was articulate enough. Or
Can families make monthly payment plans using a credit card?
So we do have a payment plan, but you cannot use a credit card. Once upon a time, that was the case, but Boston College is no longer taking credit cards as forms of payment.
Families interested to know if a 529 can be used to pay off a federal student loan after their student graduates, instead of using the 529 to pay for her education while she's going to college. So
I'm not really sure. That would be up to the organization that holds the 529. My guess is that they probably want you to use it while the student's enrolled and not after the fact. I know you can transfer it from one student to the next if you don't use it all or use it, you know, for one student, you can transfer it over to another. But you're going to have to actually contact the brokerage company that's holding your funds, unfortunately. Sorry.
If a family previously didn't think they would need financial aid, but their situation this year has changed dramatically from 2018, how should they proceed?
So we do have an appeal process. It depends on what the circumstances are. So my recommendation would be to reach out to your financial aid counselor at Boston College. We do have an appeal form online for things like income loss. But basically what we're doing is we're required to use 2018 this year, but for purposes of helping you through an appeal process, we would ask you to project what is currently happening right now in 2020. So we would be estimating what's happening right in this current year. There would be documentation asked for, and then we would be confirming the figures that we use. But we do have a process, and we are hoping to help as many families as possible in this anxious time. And I absolutely would recommend you contact your financial aid counselor.
Does a family have to accept a loan just one time for all 4 years or each year that they're at BC?
That's a good question. So Boston College, which is different from other schools, has a passive acceptance. So we'll award you the financial aid award, and we will assume you want it unless you decline it. There still will be no funds dispersed unless you sign a promissory note and do the entrance counseling that's required by the Department of Ed. But once you've done that, the funds will continue to disperse each year unless you decline them. And you can do so on the portal.
You're muted, Grant. You're muted, Grant.
Thank you. How much should we expect financial aid to change from year to year?
So our goal each year is to be as consistent as possible. We are using, the required year for that year in the same formula and asking the same questions from every family. If something changes in your financial aid award from year to year, it's because something in your information has changed. Things that are common occurrences are someone has graduated from school and we are not allowing for them in the analysis anymore, or maybe there's been a job loss or an illness with out-of-pocket medical expenses. Those things can impact a financial aid award, an inheritance, crazy things like that. Other things that impact the award from year to year are where the student's living. Are they on campus? Are they off campus? Or if there's any kind of outside scholarships. But for the most part, you should see a very consistent award each year.
If a student chooses to decline their work-study offering, because in this case, the student will be a student athlete and doesn't know if they'll have the time, will that money be replaced with anything else in their package?
So nobody is required to use their work-study, and they will not be penalized for it. However, we do not replace it with grant money. There are circumstances where we could replace it with a student loan and an unsubsidized direct loan, or maybe if the student's a Massachusetts resident and qualifies for a no interest loan, but we do not replace the work study with grant money.
A family is interested to know if a student could apply for taxes and their own financial aid without involving their parents.
So I think that's two different questions. A student should be filing their own taxes if they've earned enough money where they're required to do so. But when applying for financial aid without their parents, the only way that can happen is if the student's considered independent. And there are very specific federal guidelines that qualify a student as federally independent. And there are even fewer guidelines for Boston College to consider you independent. So in almost all scenarios, we're asking for parent information. If you think that you qualify for that situation and you have extenuating circumstances, then I would recommend contacting your financial aid counselor to discuss that, because there are, of course, people that do apply for financial aid without parent information.
Question is about timing of loans. There have been a number of these questions. What is the next step for a family that has a loan in their package? How do they sign for that loan, and when, and what does that process look like?
Well, the first part of the step would be to deposit at Boston College. And then we will send you information from the Office of Student Services regarding all of the steps that need to be taken. If the student chooses to borrow their direct loan, they have to go to the Department of Ed website using their federal student aid ID and go into their account, and they have to sign their master promissory note, and they have to do what's called entrance counseling. There is information on our website about how to do this and what this is if you need more information, but more information will be sent to you. So those two things have to happen before any funds will be dispersed. Funds will not be dispersed until late August for the fall semester and early January for the spring semester. So as far as the financial aid award loans, those two things have to happen, and then the funds will just be originated and dispersed here at the university. For private loans, that needs the parent or the family has to take the initiative to go to the lender and apply for the loan. Documentation will be sent to the university for certification purposes. An approval will happen, and then the funds will kind of sit in approval status until they're dispersed in late August as well. And you will have to sign something with the lender.
We have over 70 questions here still in the queue, and I can't keep up with all of them. So
I should stop talking and go quicker?
No, you're doing a great job. I wanted to just make a time note. We have 9 more minutes in our presentation today. So I'm going to get to just a few more questions. There is one at the very end that maybe I'll ask John, since he hasn't had a chance as well. If we can't get to all of your questions, would ask you to please contact the financial aid office on Monday. The staff will be available to take your phone calls and address any emails that you choose to send over the weekend. But the fastest way is to pick up the phone and call your financial aid counselor on Monday. And every admitted student has access in their admitted student portal to find the name and contact information of their counselor. Let's see. I'm trying to just look through the list here real quickly. A couple of questions have come in around, I think you've addressed this already, Melissa, whether a package could change over the years if the family's financial situation changes. And I think you've addressed that already, but there have been a number of them that have come in again. So maybe one more time.
Yep. So again, the Office of Student Services, the financial aid team tries to be as consistent as possible from year to year. If something is changing in your financial aid award, it's because something has changed in your information that you provided to us. It's usually a number in the family or a number in college or a significant change in income. Other than that, you should see a similar package from year to year. If for some reason the family is experiencing circumstances beyond their control and loss of income, loss of jobs, God forbid the death of a parent, those are things that we can react to and help a family through with regards to their financial aid award. Because we do need-based financial aid, it has to be something that can fit into an analysis. Like a data element needs to be changed within a formula. So unfortunately, it needs to be something that I can actually change in the analysis. But we are great at figuring out different ways to do that in the analysis, and we're happy to talk to you and figure out a way to help your families.
And then lastly, for you, Melissa, a number of questions just have come in about the realities of COVID-19 and the impacts on many families. If a family has received an award already and their circumstances have changed, what should they do?
So we're experiencing this quite a bit personally, as well as throughout the office with families and students. If you have received a financial aid award already or have not, and you are experiencing some sort of income loss or furlough or decline based on COVID, we are doing our best to help families through this. We would ask you to fill out an appeal form after speaking to your financial aid counselor first. But we're going to do our best to try and help families through this. So we will react to that if it seems doable.
Very good. The last question, actually, there were 2 questions that I paired together. One of them is, why is BC so expensive? And secondly, what makes a Boston College education worth that investment?
That's yours, John.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable question to ask of any college or university, especially as you're making this final decision. And I think that Boston College is particularly well positioned to be able to answer that question. We are expensive, as I acknowledged at the start. Almost all private higher education is going to be extremely expensive, and so it's reasonable to ask that question. I think as I consider the value of a Boston College education, I think about a couple of things. And I would start with maybe there's a great New York Times columnist, David Brooks, who spoke on our campus several years ago. And he made a statement that really resonated with me. And he said, if bricks and mortar higher education is going to survive, it's going to have to do something more. And I think we're probably learning that lesson right now, whether you're in high school or you're in college. I think it's been proven that education can be delivered pretty simply through laptops, remotely, online, that kind of thing. So what makes it worth it? What's the value of coming to a place like Boston College? What's the more? Well, there's a lot of things. I think you start with just the pedagogical model at Boston College. We believe strongly in the power, the value, the critical importance of a broadly based liberal arts education. You're going to major in something. There's no question about that. And you'll acquire expertise in some field, and that will be important. But we're living in a world that's changing rapidly due to technology. And our belief in the enduring value of a liberal arts education, the kind of education that exposes you to a lot of different subject areas, a lot of different ways of looking at the world, a lot of different ways of thinking, teaching you good critical reading skills, good analytical thinking skills, good communication skills with the written word and the spoken word. Those are things that I think will carry you through the advancing world of technology, the way in which our world is changing so rapidly. So we've not veered away from that. If anything, we've doubled down on the value of a liberal arts education, believe that it's central to a good education. But then secondly, as a Jesuit institution, that really defines the experience at Boston College. And there's a lot of mottos or catchphrases attached to Jesuit education. The one that I always latch on to is Cura Personalis, and that is care for the individual person, education of the whole person. And I think there's a recognition in the Jesuit model of education that you arrive here sort of on our doorstep at the age of 18, you might say the end of adolescence. You leave us at the age of 22, young adulthood. I don't think anybody would disagree with me that that's a critical phase in any human being's development. And it's not just intellectual. As I said, we have to give you a great education. If we weren't delivering a great education, we'd be out of business right now. But this is the more that I think David Brooks is asking for. Jesuit education really recognizes that young people are growing tremendously during this 4-year period. And they're not just growing intellectually, they're growing socially, they're growing through extracurricular activities, emotionally, psychologically. A lot is happening during this time. And Jesuit education provides lots of opportunities for students to stop, step back, and really reflect on what they're doing with their educational experience. There are retreat programs in the freshman year, in the middle of the experience, at the end. There are cornerstone classes at the start to think about how you go about your education. There are capstone classes. All of these things really give you the opportunity to reflect on what I think is a critical question. Who am I? What do I really want to be? What kind of life do I want to live? Not just what kind of profession or career do I want to have, but what kind of a life do I want to have? Jesuit education takes that part of the educational experience very seriously. We want you to really wrestle with that question. What constitutes a good life? A good and meaningful and fulfilling life? Of course you want to be a good professional. Of course you want to earn a good living that will carry you through your lifetime, but you also want to live a life that's satisfying and rewarding. In addition to that, I would just tell you that there are all kinds of opportunities here through our Career Center. About 300 companies come here per year to interview students. And you've got a tremendous Boston College alumni network. I know we're coming up right here at the end of the hour. Great alumni network. And certainly our Career Center does a great job. We know that typically each year about 95% of a typical graduating class will either be employed in full-time graduate school or on some kind of post-baccalaureate experience at the end of their experience at BC. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. Melissa, thank you. Thanks to all of you. Good luck. I hope all of you, if you're celebrating the Easter weekend, that you have a wonderful Easter. We're delighted to have you with us, and we look forward to receiving more questions for you. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.